Space doesn't care if you're watching. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't warn you, and it definitely doesn't blink. Today, we're counting down 10 real videos and images captured in space. Moments so massive, so violent, or so unsettling that they'll change the way you look at the night sky. No CGI, no reenactments, just real footage from real missions. Let's start with something 93 million miles away that could erase a city in seconds. 10. The Sun's Monster Eruption. On August 31st, 2012, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory was staring at the sun when a massive filament of solar material, held in place by magnetic fields, suddenly snapped and exploded outward into space. On August 31st, 2012, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory was staring at the sun when a massive filament of solar material, held in place by magnetic fields, suddenly snapped and exploded outward into space. The eruption, known as a coronal mass ejection, hurled plasma into space at speeds over 900 miles per second. The filament itself stretched more than 235,000 miles, roughly 30 times the diameter of Earth. For scale, our entire planet could have fit inside that single arc of fire with room to spare. The sun makes up 99% of all the mass in our solar system. And this footage is a reminder that the thing keeping us alive is also capable of throwing tantrums the size of planets. 9. NASA's intentional asteroid collision. In September 2022, NASA did something no space agency had ever attempted: deliberately crashing a spacecraft into an asteroid. Space doesn't care if you're watching. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't warn you, and it definitely doesn't blink. The final live footage from the spacecraft's camera is genuinely chilling. The asteroid's surface rushes closer and closer, rocks becoming visible in real time. And then, in a single frame, the screen goes completely black. No fade, no warning, just impact. The spacecraft was built for exactly one outcome: total destruction. It knew the whole time that this was a one-way trip. 8. The Challenger disaster. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart just 73 seconds after liftoff, live on television, in front of thousands of spectators and millions of viewers at home. All 7 crew members were lost. The cause was later traced to a failed O-ring seal in one of the solid rocket boosters, which allowed hot gas to escape and ultimately led to structural failure. It remains one of the most watched and most sobering moments in the history of spaceflight. Real footage of how unforgiving the margin for error is once you leave the ground. Seven. Alone in the Void. The Untethered Spacewalk. In February 1984, astronaut Bruce McCandless II did something no human had ever done. He stepped out of the space shuttle and floated free in open space, completely untethered. Using a jetpack-like device called the Manned Maneuvering Unit, McCandless drifted nearly 300 feet from the shuttle, with nothing connecting him back to it. If anything failed, there would be no way to pull him in. The resulting image of a lone astronaut suspended against the total blackness of space became one of the most iconic and unsettling photographs ever taken. And yet McCandless himself later said it was one of the most peaceful moments of his life. He wasn't afraid. He was just very, very cold. 6. A comet fragment lights up Europe. On the night of May 18, 2024, the sky over Spain and Portugal briefly turned from night to day. A small fragment, roughly a meter wide, weighing an estimated 500 to 1,000 kilograms, broke off from a larger body and entered Earth's atmosphere at over 100,000 kilometers per hour. The friction lit the sky in brilliant blue and green, visible across 2 countries in a display many compared to a scene from a science fiction film. The object never actually reached the ground. It burned up completely roughly 60 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean, leaving no crater and causing no damage. But it's worth sitting with the scale here. A fragment barely the size of a car did that. The asteroid believed to have ended the age of dinosaurs was the size of Mount Everest, moving even faster. And it's estimated to have wiped out roughly 75% of all species on Earth. 5. The only photos ever taken from the surface of Venus. Venus is sometimes called Earth's evil twin. Similar in size and mass, but a genuine hell in every other way. Its atmosphere, made almost entirely of carbon dioxide, traps heat so effectively that surface temperatures exceed 460 degrees Mars, 860 degrees, hot enough to melt lead. Atmospheric pressure on the surface is over 90 times that of Earth, equivalent to being nearly a kilometer underwater. In the early 1980s, the Soviet Union's Venera program achieved something no one has repeated since: landing a probe on the surface and transmitting back real color photographs before the crushing heat and pressure destroyed it. Venera 13 survived just over 2 hours on the surface, a record that still stands. It even recorded the sound of Venusian wind before it went silent forever. Those images remain the only surface photographs of Venus that exist. No mission has landed there since. 4. Pale blue dot. In 1990, from a distance of over 3.7 billion miles, the Voyager 1 spacecraft turned its camera back toward home and took one last photograph before continuing into deep space. In the frame, Earth, reduced to a single pixel of light, suspended in a beam of scattered sunlight. Everyone who has ever lived, every war, every empire, every person you've ever loved, exists on that pixel. Astronomer Carl Sagan, who championed the idea of taking this photo, later wrote about it in words that remain some of the most quoted in the history of space exploration. A meditation on just how small, fragile, and alone our world really is in the vastness of the cosmos. It's not a scary image in the traditional sense, but for many, it's the most existentially unsettling photo ever taken. 3. Flying through the sun's atmosphere. Imagine building a spacecraft that flies closer to the sun than anything humans have ever made, and surviving. That's the Parker Solar Probe, launched by NASA to dive directly into the sun's outer atmosphere. The corona, where temperatures reach into the millions of degrees. It's the fastest human-made object in history, reaching speeds of over 430,000 miles per hour. And at its closest approach, it came within about 3.8 million. That sounds like a huge number. Until you realize that if the distance between Earth and the Sun were shrunk down to a single meter, Parker would be just 4 centimeters away from the surface. The spacecraft survives thanks to a massive heat shield, and the footage it sends back is built from real data and imagery captured while flying through solar plasma and storms. The closest real view of a star humanity has ever achieved. As for the eerie sound often paired with this footage, that's a real scientific technique called sonification, converting the radio waves and plasma signals the probe detected into a frequency range human ears can hear. It's not a recording in the traditional sense. It's data, translated into something we can listen to. And it makes the environment around the sun feel exactly as hostile as it actually is. 2. Landing on Mars, filmed in real time. This is the first video in human history to capture, in high definition, a spacecraft landing on the surface of another planet. Before touching down on Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover was moving through the Martian atmosphere at nearly 12,500 miles per hour. In under 7 minutes, it had to slow from that speed to a complete stop, or be destroyed on impact. To pull it off, NASA used one of the most complex landing sequences ever engineered. A giant parachute, a series of braking rockets, and finally a system called the Sky Crane, which lowered the rover to the surface on cables before flying off and crashing at a safe distance. Cameras mounted directly on the spacecraft captured the entire descent. What makes it genuinely eerie to watch isn't a monster or an anomaly. It's the raw fact that you're watching real, high-definition footage from the surface of another world, roughly 140 million miles from home. 1. The galaxy shaped like a question mark. In 2023, The James Webb Space Telescope was aimed at a pair of glowing, nebula-like objects known as Herbig-Haro objects, jets of gas blasted out by young forming stars. But buried in the same image, astronomers noticed something that shouldn't have been there. It remains one of the most watched and most sobering moments in the history of spaceflight. Real footage of how unforgiving the margin for error is once you leave the ground. A small, unusually bright galaxy near the center of the frame. One shaped almost exactly like a question mark. It sits roughly 1.5 billion light-years from Earth, near a distant galaxy cluster catalogued as MPG-CG 2933. Its bright core forms the dot, and a curved tail stretching around 100,000 light-years forms the rest of the shape. Astronomers believe it isn't one galaxy at all, but two, locked in the early stages of colliding and merging, their shapes stretched and distorted by gravity into this exact silhouette purely by chance from our specific angle in space. It remains one of the most watched and most sobering moments in the history of spaceflight. Real footage of how unforgiving the margin for error is once you leave the ground. Space isn't trying to scare you. It's just enormous, indifferent, and mostly empty. And every so often, it lets us catch a glimpse of exactly how enormous that really is. If one of these gave you chills, let me know which one in the comments. Subscribe for more real space footage every week, and I'll see you in the next one.